morning. Let's go ahead and get started. So happy Friday. We got through the first week, what seems to be pretty normal so far. So thank you for all of your hard work and engagement throughout the quarter. I'll be talking through a couple things for today, but most of the class is going to be based on an activity where you're going to be working together in groups and applying some of the things that we've been talking about so far in the quarter. We've got several folks who are joining us through Zoom today. I know that there's athletics and other events that are currently happening. I sent out a reminder yesterday through Canvas announcements, but just to refresh everybody, again, if you can't make class, but you are able to join through Zoom, like through contact exposure or so on, you're welcome to do that. If you can't join us face-to-face or through Zoom, the recordings come up after class and you can complete the makeup assignment on Canvas to cover credit for that day. You're also welcome to reach out to me in my office hours. Again, those are posted on the syllabus, and you can use Zoom or face-to-face to meet with me. It's a great way to catch up if you find yourself needing this class for multiple days. So to get started for today, one of the first things we talked about last class was the group membership reflection. Again, this is an assignment where I'm asking you to think about a group that you're either currently a member of or previously was a member of, and to reflect on the way that that group participates and your own communication and roles within that group. Secondarily, we talked about some elements of communication roles, including Belden's self-perception inventory. And we also talked about some of the ideas surrounding status and trust, which of course are important elements of good communication. So just a couple additional reminders about this group membership reflection assignment. One thing, right, is the Purdue OWL has a lot of style guides. I recommend, again, using APA. You can use MLA or Chicago if you prefer. You want to use in-text citations and works cited lists. If you find that you're needing help or you're not sure about how you're citing your sources, you're welcome to get in touch with me. I'll also be posting the official citation or the textbook, since I know we're just using snippets of the ebook. I'll try to make that easier for you. Again, I'm happy to look at rough drafts and outlines. Just send them to me with enough time. And then start to plan and outline. This is a short writing assignment. It shouldn't take you a whole lot of time to work on and be pretty low stakes overall, but I still want to help you with planning and starting to think through what to expect there. Again, if you check on Canvas, you'll be able to see the guidelines for that, as well as a couple of the major assignments, of course. So if you go to, again, the Canvas page for small group communication, and you scroll down to the third week, you'll see that that reflection is there. And the entire prompt that you can access that we went over last class is available too. One other thing to have on your radar is that since we are approaching the end of the second week, the week 2 quiz is due by this Sunday. So the week 1 quiz was due Wednesday because there was an extended period of time. Just complete the week 2 quiz by the end of this week. The week 2 quiz, again, covers these readings related to group membership and roles. Again, it's open note, open book, and pretty similar to what you can expect from the last one. Any questions regarding that writing assignment, quiz, anything else in the class at this point? Great. Again, if questions do come up, let me know. And that essay is due on the 26th. We talked about Belden's self-perception inventory last class. I'm not going to go through all of these again, but it's just useful to know, right, that we have these 9 different roles, and I'm asking you to pick one of those 9 roles that you feel like is a good match for you, and to discuss that role overall. We also talked about the role of status and trust. Again, status is about the reputation or credibility or experience somebody brings to the table. So if somebody is an expert, right, and somebody that you can really count on and trust, then they have a lot of status. And trust, right, is this idea that we build over time, relationships and good communication with others. So this class, I want to hit on a couple remaining ideas from this week related to culture and the way that media shapes small group communication. And again, we'll be dedicating most of the class to the survival activity. So throughout the quarter, I'll be doing a few activities like this one, where you'll be participating in a group and working together. And then one of your later writing assignments in the class is a reflection on your participation and some of these in-class group activities. So one key idea, and this is something we explore a little bit more in classes like interpersonal communication and intercultural communication, is the role of context, right? Context matters because if you're talking to somebody and they seem really stressed out because they've been applying for a job and they're waiting to find out if they got the job, right? You're not suddenly going to jump in and start casually chatting with them, right? You're being attuned to and sensitive to the needs of that person and the concerns that they have in that moment, right? So oftentimes we try to get our feelers out and figure out if we are communicating in a way that makes sense for the given situation, and that's context. So one key idea, right, is the culture refers to the various combination of things such as tradition, social identity, practices, and performance, and so on. One kind of culture or element of culture is nationality, right, or national origin. That's not the only way to define culture. You can define culture in the activities, the religious or spiritual views you might have, and a lot of different aspects of your identity, right? Nationality, though, and sort of national affiliation is one way to measure culture. So when we talk about context in cultures, it's a spectrum that runs from low to high, right? So on the one end, we have low context cultures such as the United States and Australia. And on the other end, we have more high context cultures such as Japan and China. What context means, right, is the amount of subtext or hidden messages that are present. And in a lot of low context cultures like the US, we don't like having a lot of context for subtext. We like to say what we mean, and a lot of our communication tends to be very explicit. So the big reason for this is to reduce ambiguity, right, and to make sure that the communication that's sent is understood by the other person. So in a low context culture, there's less likely to be attention placed on your use of nonverbal communication, your gestures, your facial expressions, so on, right? If you don't want to do something, you're more likely to say no because that's how you feel in the moment. You decide to say no, right? Whereas in high context cultures, in these types of cultures, in general, there's a much higher population, right? And as a result of that, there tend to be greater emphasis on norms and communication that's a little bit more subtle, right? In a culture such as Japan or China, it might be seen as rude or disrespectful to say the word no, because even though you're saying what you mean, right, the norms, behavior of that group might value things like harmony and collaboration a little bit more. So you might be more likely to say yes or maybe in a somewhat hesitant voice to indicate that you don't support something, but without directly saying no, right? And so in a more low context culture, those cultural cues and norms play a much bigger role. And so you have to, especially, right, when you're engaging with a different culture or group as an outsider, have to figure out those norms and behave in a way that makes sense to them. So if you've ever experienced culture shock traveling abroad, right, oftentimes it's because of those differences in norms that extend beyond language, but also extend to a lot of the regular practices you do. Another key idea, right, is code switching. Code switching is something that relates to the role of culture and how small groups communicate. So, for instance, one common practice, right, is the idea that folks who are bilingual with English and Spanish might pepper in or include words from one language into another. This is especially true for languages that have words that don't translate so easily. In fact, if we think about the English language, right, we incorporate and to some extent appropriate a lot of language from other cultures. We use a lot of Greek and Roman roots for words. And we also incorporate, again, language from other cultures to define things. For instance, describing the taste of food and the sensation of food, such as umami, right, would come from other cultures. You could also think about the way that we incorporate, for instance, a lot of German phrases into our language too, right? Terms such as Schadenfreude, or the pleasure somebody takes in the suffering of other people, right? there's a lot of like words like that that we use or put into the English language from others. So code switching is something that we do a lot of the time already. Code switching relates to small groups oftentimes communicate with one another, especially if there's differences, right? We might not be fully understanding of how somebody's communicating because of the words that they add in. So thinking about code switching is an important way to think about how culture shapes small group communication, especially for folks who are bilingual, right, and come in from different cultures. Another key idea, right, and something that I definitely noticed so far in some of your group activities, like the one that we did last week, is self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is opening the box, right? It is sharing and articulating information about yourself to other people. So through self-disclosure, you're choosing to open up, be more honest. One model that we talk about in classes like interpersonal communication is social penetration theory. The idea that you have these sort of outside layers, basic information. Here's my grade, here's where I'm from, here's my name. You have more intermediate layers. So things like your political beliefs, your social beliefs on issues, maybe the music and TV that you like, and then the kind of inner layer of the core values and beliefs that define who you are, right? So you're somebody that really has this goal of being a teacher, for instance. So self-disclosure is a choice, right? It's how you choose to share and communicate aspects about yourself to other people. And in small groups, this is a challenge because it can be hard to figure out what the appropriate amount to disclose to other groups is. So for instance, if you're getting to know and working with a group that's trying to put out an advertisement for your company, right, you're not going to tell everybody your life story and distract from the conversation. But you might choose to share a few things about yourself to help get to know other people. For instance, again, some of your hobbies and interests and some small ones. So it's a difficult line to try to balance disclosure without oversharing. One thing we've seen a lot over the past 2 years, right, and something that not all of us have enjoyed, including things like Zoom, right, have been the ways that we've used digital groups to communicate within small groups. So that's been a really big role in our small group communication over the past couple of years. In fact, there are studies that find that we get more exhausted from things like Zoom meetings. The big reason why is because we're constantly picking up on nonverbal signals through the little boxes, right? We're trying to pick up on facial expressions, cues, and so on in this flat, small 2D space. Oftentimes, right, we have the Brady Bunch where there's multiple boxes going on at the same time. And in that situation, right, our brains get kicked into overdrive. It's a lot harder for us to feel like we're following the conversation well. So digital groups play a big role. Also, right, a lot of platforms such as Discord have been popular opportunities for small group communication. Folks even brought up earlier in some of the small groups that they use that things such as Snapchat have also been used by small groups. So in a lot of situations, such as folks that might work remotely, digital communication might be the only way the small group communicates. Or it could be a big part of how small groups communicate when they're not meeting on a regular basis. Again, a lot of people mentioned that for their own groups, they'd have something like a group chat. So one way of thinking about this challenge, though, is that when you communicate remotely, there is a lot that you can't share in the same way face-to-face, right? A lot of us miss face-to-face classes and interaction because there's a lot more that we get out of the experience. We're in a 3D space, we physically see and talk to the other person, we use things like facial expressions, gestures, and so on to communicate. There have been more effective substitutes, for instance, emojis and reactions in digital settings, and even the use of video chat and so on, but it's still not quite the same, right? Digital groups can raise some really unique challenges. One of them being knowing the norms of the group, right? So if you've joined like a Discord group that maybe is talking about, for instance, a video game or game series that you really enjoy, right? Maybe you're a big fan of Skyrim and you want to join a group that's talking about that game, right? You're not just going to join and talk about other games, right? You're going to try to make sure that you understand the norms and the rules. Oftentimes, there's like moderation guidelines that a lot of online forums and settings have. Another challenge is thinking about the norms of the group, right? Be careful about that because you want to understand and know what those norms are ahead of time. Gender plays a really big role in communication, not because people are hardwired biologically necessarily, but because of culture and socialization, right? Studies suggest that it's a lot more about what we're told our roles are or how we're told to communicate. And so that can play a big role on online spaces in particular. Empathy is really important too, right? Thinking about and trying to understand where somebody's coming from, especially if there's a lot of cues or signals that you can't pick up on. So maybe you're in a Zoom meeting and somebody seems like you're really like drifting away or not very focused. That can be a way to check in with people and take additional initiative online. Humor, right, can go over well or not in online settings. It's especially hard again because we lose a lot of nonverbal signals like tone, so on. For instance, some people will like explicitly mark if they're being sarcastic when they're communicating digitally, like they'll use like slash followed by S to indicate sarcasm. So it's a challenge, right, to make sure that your humor is appropriate for the situation. And we also know, right, if you have ever scrolled down to the comments section, that things like flaming, right, where you're attacking and criticizing the other person, engaging in hateful messages, so on, can be a problem. Catfishing, right, is where you pretend to be somebody else other than who you are online. In fact, there's an entire TV show that's about that. People pretending to be this amazing person that somebody starts dating and then they meet in real life. It's totally different. So these are challenges and definitely things that a lot of you have probably felt communicating online. And then one of the last ideas that I want to get into is about media richness, right? Media richness theory suggests that we have, again, another spectrum of how meaningful and engaged our communication in groups is. So it runs on a spectrum, right? Something like numbers or an email is what we would consider to be lean media. And you can measure media richness theory basically by how much it engages with your senses. If you're reading an email, it's just a bunch of text, right? It's not very engaging, it's not very thoughtful or interesting. Your eyes might glaze over as you're reading and you're working through your inbox. So that's lean media. In richer media, right, starts to get into things such as social media, where people can comment and engage more actively, something like a voice call, video call, right, or using things like Zoom, it's a lot more engaged, and then face-to-face, right, will be considered the most engaged because it's 3D space, you're using all of your senses, you can understand nonverbal cues like tone of voice, so on. So understanding the richness of media is important to understanding how much of a message we can get across in a small group. So definitely think about this spectrum too when you're thinking about how small groups choose to communicate. So what I want to do next is I'm going to be giving you a survival activity. This is actually a scenario that's used by the US military. It is a kind of interesting way to think about how small groups can work together and communicate with one another. So this survival activity essentially is one in which your group is trapped out in the wilderness, and what your group has to figure out are the most important items that your group can use for survival. So the way that we'll do this is I'll divide you up into groups. I'll give you 20 minutes to discuss and work among your groups. And your group, and you can either type or write this for your attendance for today, we'll come up with your list, most least important, and then I'll ask each group to share as well. So I have, if you're not able to access it very well through here, through the board, I also have the assignment linked on Canvas under small group day 1. So I'm going to share the scenario. For those of you that are on Zoom, I'll have you all join together as a breakout room and then email me one person in your group who's assigned to send me your work on this one. So you and your companions have just survived the crash of a small plane. Both the pilot and co-pilot were killed in the crash. Mid-January, and you're in northern Canada. The daily temperature is 25 degrees below zero, and the nighttime temperature is 40 degrees below zero. There's snow on the ground. The countryside is wooded with creeks crisscrossing the area. Nearest town is 20 miles away. You're all dressed in city clothes for business meeting. The items that your group has been able to get: ball steel wool, small axe, a loaded 45 caliber pistol, can of Crisco shortening, newspapers, one per person, cigarette lighter, extra shirt and pants, heavy duty canvas, sectional air mat, a quarter whiskey, compass, and chocolate bars. So your group is going to write out and rank the 12 items in order of importance. So you'll need to work together to agree collectively about those items and how you would rank those items in importance. So you'll be able to work together to try to figure that out. And again, for those of you on Zoom, I recommend doing like a snapshot or screen capture or accessing this link on Canvas before I get you into your breakout rooms. So for this activity, let's have 1, 2, 3, and 4 as a group. We'll have 1, 2, 3, and 4 as a group. Actually, that leaves us at 3. So let's expand. Sorry, let's expand that out a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we'll add, and then we'll do 6 here, and then we'll have the 5 folks here. So 5 to 6 people.
There's 12 items, right?
Yep. And then Zoom folks, I'm going to create a breakout room for you. Please join the breakout room once you have your list ready or able to access it.
Okay. I'm going to start us off. That canvas, man. I think that canvas needs to come in number 1 because that's so. The canvas, because that's shelter here in Canada. You need to shelter real quick. I watched the Alone one time. You know, it's like they get dropped in Canada. That's what they always do. They get shelter built first. That axe is the one. What about that? I put that number 3. I think that axe, because that canvas ain't gonna be warm enough to the canvas like good shell. But what's up against that axe? Yeah.
Cigar lighter, you get like spark out one of like the pieces of wool that should be up to
Oh, wait.
Okay, I'll put that in number 4 there. A cigarette lighter.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Or make the sun. They throw bear or something up there.
So are we saying that heavy duty canvas is basically just a big ass thing of plywood, but
Oh, that's steel wool.
huh?
So canvas spread would be more of like a tarp type of substance.
Okay.
Yeah. You make something
Well,
like a
I want to
flag.
set up to the side now. Let me read it.
Absolutely.
What's Crisco shortening?
Crisco shortening is sometimes used with like cooking, similar things like that. It can help with starting fires.
Like butter? Okay. Newspapers, those are good. Oh, that, which should be number 1? Keep more. Oh, that extra shirt and pants is pretty important because then it is more warm.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know, depending where you are.
So past the first page is the actual list, so don't look at that yet.
In Canada, I feel like it'd be pretty handy. I mean, that 45 will drop that will drop a large animal. As long as you're not trying to shoot it for it. But that basically decent, had a pretty close range.
Newspaper.
What's that?
Maybe we use the canvas.
Yeah, let's do Canada Crisco. how important they are.
No, we
Like,
couldn't put it in order.
that sectional air maps. That just shows, what does that show you?
Not a whole lot, right? It just tells you basic information related to the surrounding area.
Yeah. No, that's a map. That's an air map though, not a not, that doesn't show you like ground and things though, right?
Right, no, not the ground.
Okay, that's dead last. I can get 2 carries left. Canvas, then axe, and 45 pistol, cigarette lighter, extra clothes. Still clothes around anything. That's okay. Yeah, and Crisco, and then
You still have everything.
I think that chocolate bars are pretty important.
Yeah.
Because chocolate's pretty good. Well, that's guaranteed food. And if you're smart enough, you can use the sunrise in the east, that's in the west kind of thing. You can figure out where north and south is. I bring
Not smart enough.
yeah, but if you don't know your surroundings very well. Because chocolate actually has a lot in it that, like a lot of nutrients and stuff in it that actually can help you out really good. I put chocolate bars then.
We just have one list of.
Yeah, so one list per group, and it should be what you all collectively agree.
Okay.
What else do we need? So we got newspaper.
Sectional air map.
Oh, that whiskey is really making it long. List. So the whiskey and, oh, I put that air map.
You put what?
Oh, yeah, at the bottom. Because all it shows us is the sky. So I can look up. So we got the whiskey and what else? Oh, did the steel wool really make it that far up? Oh, I think I need to move some things down the list. Because steel wool is super good. I'll put it.
If I was to group together like with the newspaper and still wool and Crisco, like all kind of yeah.
I'm gonna move.
Yeah, for fire stuff.
I'm gonna move everything down one, just and put canvas.
Yeah. And then
Or I guess the cigarette lighter. Not necessarily as close as we have.
But it doesn't still spark a little bit. It doesn't, because, yeah.
Right. That's where you come in.
Okay, so we got canvas, axe, pistol, cigarette lighter, extra clothes, can of Crisco, steel wool, chocolate bar, compass, newspaper, whiskey. Air. First thing I crashed. I don't know if I'm thinking I'm sweet about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably gonna hurt a little bit. We're actually playing.
So, with
There's snow on the ground. Have you guys ever watched that show Alone? I think, or wait, yeah, Alone.
oh, the campus.
It's like, so they take this group of like 15, 20 people, I think, or something like that. Maybe it's less, but they go drop them off at certain points and it's all in like the relatively. Yeah, and they drop with 10 items and they get to choose these 10 items, most people choose. But it can't, there's like a extent to what it can be. Like, so they can't hold that gun. But if they take a bow, it would be a reefer bow, not a common bow, and stuff like that. Like, it's pretty intense.
How long do you go out for?
That's, they're out there until the last minute same thing. So one of the days went like 60 days or something like that. Because it was just like 2 guys were left. We're like 20 days, so it was just 2 guys.
One.
is whiskey could also be used with fire starter too. You know, like
you have about 10 more minutes. Again, remember, each group needs to have an agreed upon list.
One of the guys in the show went 87 days. The second name is 36-year-old guy. Second longest was 86 days. He's medically evacuated. A lot of those guys get lost. 87 days just out. It's almost 3 months. But you know what? I think I almost arrived for 30 days just out there, just doing this thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's like $1 million. I think the guy who won that, I think I watched that season, and he's got like a lot of badgers. He like read the badger had to shoot it. Apparently badgers are like really good to eat, like really high proteins and fats.
Badgers are pretty crazy too.
What else is there bad at?
They're like going to a house. They're not scared of anything. They're like,
They don't mess around. I feel like with this list, we also got shelter. We actually started our own city. If I had all that, and I'm glad just hanging out, I could do it all day.
The only thing you're missing is just finding water and stuff like that.
Well, it's right next to streets and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
There's towns 20 miles away. Yes, for that. Screw that nearest town is 20 miles away. I'm camping out.
When I did this, right, one of the major differences was goals, right? Do you want to get out, find help, or do you want to like survive until help? Like,
Yeah, how, yeah.
It's 20 miles north, south, east, or west. Does that make?
You don't know.
That's very good.
You can migrate with
Well,
this.
I don't think I know.
That's not a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I mean, other than that 20 by 20 canvas, that's gonna be heavier than Almeida. Or wait, oh, that's just like a sword. When I think of the canvas, it's like a tent like these for elk.
I feel like that should be tough. So I'm there or something.
You either shoot the bear or the bear.
These are for warmth.
The
No.
bear will most of the bears are murdered. It's not one below zero. He's on 5,000.
If you're close up to it, it was from me to where he's at. Well, if you're that close to a bear and it's running at you, it's gonna keep coming at you. But put a couple rounds of that sucker in there. It's a loaded 45. That's 9 rounds.
Yeah, I know too, man.
That's 9 rounds. 45. If they're running,
You gotta be like all your shots.
look at the bullet.
I like to be preparing for bears and other things that might come up.
I know. Eli is gonna do push-ups.
I'm not saying one bullet because if they're running at you, they're not gonna stop running at you. But you can just shoot it a few times. But it's all about placing your shots good.
Or we can light it on fire.
Don't put it in the leg.
There.
It's arson.
It's not that good. Is this loaded with olive points
I
or what?
love the trees. I'm gonna try to climb
I think it's actually loaded with bullets.
Yeah, but like what kind of bullets is the question? Because that determines whether or not you take a bear down.
I see that video of those guys that are selling the tree.
No, you make the bear.
Yeah.
We
Bro, that shit was dope. So scary.
All right, so you have about 5 more minutes.
first, film later. Shoot yourself down.
So this is a 45. Not that long. It's like pretty big around. Those things, those things, especially if there's something like one of these hollows where it'll explode when it gets in there.
Hey.
No, I trust the 45 to stop.
Yes, it's still can.
Well, I would more than trust the 45 to stop there because I carry it out of the weapon wood.
But then again,
It has to stop there.
personal was like 25 years ago, so.
What's that?
Well, 25 below.
It's 25 below.
But at the same time,
I think it's everyone close enough. Probably.
Yeah,
that Coney was that bear walking across our.
There's a video, this girl that was on her car, she was up the door up.
What are you? What's your name?
Pay attention.
Oh, she's a bird, okay.
And like, actually.
Oh, this is perfect for me.
Anyway, I just see a picture.
Black bears are pretty innocent, but like up in Canada, you got them. Places there.
Laid off.
Our, one of our really good family friends, Brad, him and his dad went up
Yeah,
to,
they are. My mom.
we were in Alaska,
Oh,
Canada.
nice.
They got flown into this like really remote river. And then you go on the river and you can go on like this just trip fishing and all that stuff. And right to the end, they pick you up. And it's up in the middle of just nowhere. And he said one day they set up camp on the side of the river and the grizzly bear came over to their camp. And like walked over and like was looking at Brad. He said it was really good when he just shot him.
We shot it.
And he shot a boar next to it to scare it away.
That's where your Crisco was like right there.
You know, that might sketch me out.
It's a nice little healthy pork fat.
Do you?
Did you hear that sound? It's like, yep. The woods fight.
Oh, no, the bear. Oh, yeah. it's on that butt.
I mean, depending on how long you're kind of do want to know.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Who said that? Except Chuck.
I don't know, I just remember it being like a sound on TikTok.
I really wanted to prioritize it, right? It really was.
Well, you're right. So you like,
Yeah.
is there really?
There is later in the, we'll talk about it a little bit later. Yeah, the later phases have that. Have at least one recommendation, although your survival strategy could be a little different.
Oh, it's a song.
So 2 more minutes. Take some time, make sure your group has an agreed upon list.
It's like,
Mystical is what it says. I fight a bear with that axe. I love to start seeing that. Is this a sharpened axe?
Medium.
oh, now that changed the whole thing.
That changed
It's
a
got a
lot.
little bit of use, but, you know. Looks like Zoom folks got to rejoin, and it sounds like most folks have come to an agreement about your ranking. So I want to hear, again, we have 2 groups here and then 1 group on Zoom. So I'd like to hear from each group about your ranking and why you did that ranking. So let's start up here with this group. Yeah, so what ended up being your survival ranking?
Okay, this is about as good as a list can get.
Okay,
All right, this is from experience.
all right.
All right, number 1, 20 by 20 canvas, because
Okay.
it's cold. You're gonna need some shelter.
Sure.
All right, that's gonna get you started. Coming in at number 2, axe.
Okay.
Need to cut up some wood, need to cut down some small limbs and stuff to cover your canvas to kind of get some insulation.
Sure.
That 45 pistol, because I'm gonna be dropping a bear and eating that some gun. Number 4, cigarette lighter. Okay, while it may not have fluid, it still has a spark, which is pretty good for dried out stuff we can find for wood and stuff.
Yeah.
Extra clothes, it's cold.
Yeah.
We need to get some clothes on, warm up a little bit, because extra shirt and pants for each survivor, that works out pretty good.
Okay.
Can of Crisco, you never know. Steel wool is just handy all around. It's pretty, I like steel wool. Chocolate bar. Chocolate has a lot of good stuff in it to eat that will kind of replenish you a little bit until you get some other food. Compass, so you can tell which direction you're looking. Newspaper, it's a good helper for starting fires, or if you want to catch up on last week's news. While you're there. Coming in at number 11, we got whiskey. While it may help you calm the nerves, I don't think it's super handy in a complete survival situation. And then the last place, air mat, because I don't need to know which way the airplane's flying.
Sure. So what is y'all's overall strategy? Is your goal to like camp out? Is your goal to like book it, get home, or try to find somewhere else to go?
I had a cool with hanging out,
Okay. Yeah.
but and like, what's that? I think we could like get situated and slowly migrate maybe.
Okay.
20 miles, that's a long ways,
Sure.
especially in that. No, not out in Canada. They're crazy. There's boots and shit.
All right.
Oh,
I like it. I also like the like adaptation. I like the adaptation to wildlife y'all do. For sure. All right. So let's do this group over here. So what is your list?
we're gonna cut up that canvas Leo brings. What is our goal?
Well, I think it's kind of standard there, it's
We're-
it,
we're
and then
trying to
the next
survive.
day.
Yeah,
spread out.
Okay. Okay.
So first thing we're doing is we're putting on our extra shirts and pants for warmth. We have our cigarette lighter, use the flint and stuff to get a fire. Compass, so we know directions and where we're going and whatnot. Ball of steel wool, fire starter, fire helper, keeps it going longer. We have our loaded pistol for protection from whatever comes after us. We have our heavy duty canvas for shelter. And then we have family sized chocolate bars for food and restoration and whatnot.
Sure.
Small axe for utilities. Whiskey for fire and a good time. Newspaper for shelter and fire, helper starter, air mat. We don't really know what it is, but it's general knowledge of the area. And then Crisco shorts make protection against the cold.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting that you all have kind of a similar strategy where you're kind of camping out, but you're also moving a little bit if you need to in order to survive, right? How about our group on Zoom? Is there someone on the group that would like to share what ranking you all came up with together?
Yeah, I can. I'm the one that typed it. So
Okay.
for us, we had first the 20 by 20 piece of heavy duty canvas, primarily for shelter. Then second, the small axe for shelter, wood cutting, collecting. 3, we had extra clothes for warmth. Kind of self-explanatory. I mean, it's like really cold in Canada. So then 4th, we had the 45 caliber pistol, primarily for protection. But again, if there was one of us that felt comfortable shooting something, food, obviously. 5, we had Crisco, primarily for food again. Because it's not really flammable. So 6, we had the 100 proof whiskey for a fire starter and to drink, stay warm. 7, we had the cigarette lighter with, it doesn't have fluid, but we could start it with maybe the whiskey, something else. 8, we had newspapers, fire starter. 9, we had the ball of steel wool, potentially to help start the fire as well. 10, we had chocolate bars food, obviously. 11, we had the compass. We had the compass so far down, maybe because, there are a lot of other methods to, know which direction you're supposed to go or where to go. And then lastly, we just had the air map. We didn't really think of any use for this in the meantime, maybe for directions if someone knows how to read it, but probably isn't that useful.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Millie. Make sure by the end of class that you email me your group's list and then the names of folks in your group. It seems like you had some similar strategies there too. So a little bit later in the document, if you scroll down, right, there's an explanation by a military expert about how he would rank these different things, right? So a little bit of details about survival and strategy and so on. There's a former instructor in survival training. So he thinks the cigarette lighter is the most important because of cold, right? The way that it can be a signaling device, build a fire, and so on. Ranks the ball of steel wool really high to catch sparks and help create a flame. Curtain pants, most folks rank that pretty high. Crisco shortening, it's kind of funny, right? That it has all of these different uses, such as being signaling from the lid, which is a little bit of a stretch, but using it for signaling, rub, in fact, on the cold, canvas, we'll rank it pretty high for protection. Small axe can be useful for wood, right? Chocolate bars, kids, food energy, newspapers for a fire, we just brought that up. Interesting that the pistol, right, does not have a very high ranking. One thing they thought was that the pistol might be used in infighting because of agreement amongst the group. Whiskey for car building, and then the compass and the air map, right, are discouraged because they actually might cause people to move in a different direction, not knowing where they are, and could create problems with strategy. So that's just kind of fun, but depending on the group and the group's goals, right, the strategy is going to look really different. I think for a lot of people, right, you've had this combination of surviving in the moment, but also getting where you need to go, trying to go on, so on. So I thought it was a kind of fun way for us to think about what among your group your goals are, how you're articulating those goals and developing your list of those in mind.
So this RV guy, he didn't know what was going on. He was like, I'm in some bad situation.
So, as I was listening to you all share and some of the things that came up in your group, right, I was noticing a lot of things in small group communication that were happening. For instance, some of the ways that your group decided on the list. That's why I brought up this question of what are the overall strategy and goals that you all use, right? Again, a lot of people had a combination of surviving in the moment, but also maybe getting somewhere else or moving a little bit. I noticed some really different roles, right? So for instance, I think somebody like Clint had this kind of co-manager type of role where there was like leadership involved in putting together the list. But I also noticed here in this group, some folks like Kate, right, there's a focus on like maybe like a plan or creative role, thinking about the way that things like bears might be a really important survival. I also noticed, right, people came in with different levels of knowledge and experience about some of these items. Some people knew what Crisco shortening was, some people had never heard of it, right? We go into small groups, there's a lot of differences in our knowledge of this information. And also that, again, some people really wanted to book it and get out of there, some people wanted to camp out. Other people thought it was really important to get a signal, right, and to try to get outside help. So in a lot of small groups like this one, including in survival, right, our goals and ways that we're going to try to get those goals could look really different too. So that would be kind of a fun way to think about some of the ideas that we talked about today.
Figure if that plane crashes, there's people on the way to help.
Yeah. So we talked about kind of online communication, culture, goals, and so on. We did this activity as a way to connect to some of the group goals, membership, and ways that members of groups can participate to try to reach solutions on issues. So we do not meet next Monday. Enjoy the long weekend for MLK Day, but we will be meeting the following Wednesday on the 19th, and we'll be talking about listening to small groups. So I hope you all have a great long weekend. Enjoy your time off. Stay safe if you're traveling, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.
just a long wallet.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, though.
It's one.
It's the thought that counts.